I'm really excited to be here today and moderating and hosting this panel. Just quick introduction. So I'm Victoria. I'm with Tricentis for over 10 years already, and I have here some thought leaders from the industry space which will share some goals, challenges, lessons learned, and outcomes with you around testing and testing transformation. So as you heard from the morning from Sandeep, digital transformation is real, right? It's a big, big topic, and the testing transformation is one part of it. And that's why we picked the theme of the panel, Testing Transformation, Why? And with that, I want to welcome the team here. So I want to please ask to introduce yourself, who you are, your role, the company, and also to give the audience a little bit of feeling of how long you are already on the journey. Can you talk about that as well? So let's start off with Sandra. Welcome.
All right, thanks, Victoria. So my name is Sandra Baker, and I work with WorldPay. I've been on our transformation for probably around 4 years now, with the company for 5 years total. So started that transformation about a year into that journey. So I'm a technology leader managing our automation and performance testing.
Great, welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. My name is Alex Curiosis, and I head up the testing for the group payment division of a bank in Australia called ANZ. I've been on the journey for about 4.5 years, and my journey is a little bit different because I came in initially to look at the testing activities and resolve them, and in the middle of that, the enterprise went through a transformation, so we had to rejig our change model to fit the enterprise.
Okay, welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. My name is Tammy Davis. I'm the Director of Global Quality Engineering for Intercontinental Hotels Group. We have been on our transformation journey within our overall technology space for about 2 years, and testing makes up a major part of that.
Perfect. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for that. Everybody already quite a long time on their journey. So I think what would be very interesting for the audience is, can you talk a little bit on how did you get on there? How did you convince your leadership team that testing is really a topic on their agenda and that it is important to really invest in that? Tammy?
Well, I think one of the really beneficial things for us at IHG was that our C-suite already was well bought into the fact that not only did we need a transformation overall, but that testing had to be a major component of that in order to be a success.
Okay.
In my situation, we're probably a little bit different. So I was initially brought in with the one objective. Testing is fully outsourced and it doesn't work. Come in and fix it. So I received a level of sponsorship initially to review what was going on. And as we evolved, they started seeing benefits that the quality stream was bringing to the programs, and presenting to steering committees, presenting to the C-level executives in regards to the benefits we were achieving along the way, enabled us to get further buy-in, additional funds, and more time to continue on the journey.
Okay, interesting.
Yes, and we also went through the Agile transformation and knew that we had to bring testing and automation transformation into that journey as well. And what helped make us successful with that is that the leadership was bought into that. We actually had a funded project with prioritization, and so that really helped us to kind of, get everyone's buy-in, and because it's not just about testing and the testing resources, but about the whole organization transforming, and that kind of helped us to move that forward.
Okay, interesting. So sounds like Tammy and Sandra had a similar journey. So leadership was already did buy already into it, as it was part of the change agenda and the overall digital transformation. Whereas Alex, you had to make your way up basically to convince them. So can you talk a little bit? I think for the audience it would be interested to hear, how did you do that, and how did you show success and make sure that testing becomes then part of their agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I was initially brought in because the organisation had a perception that the current testing activities weren't working to their level of expectation. So I had the ability to come in. Now, the problem I had, though, was I walk in and the first thing they go, testing's not working, automate. And I sit back and go, well, if testing's not working, automating isn't necessarily going to fix your problem. Yeah. So I actually spent probably about 6 months getting a baseline, understanding the current state of testing, what the problems were they perceived problems or real problems, and then slowly start chipping away. And what I find, and in my experience in doing this type of activity, is if your foundations aren't right, you could put any tool, any automation over the top, you're still going to be in exactly the same boat. Mm-hmm. So I actually spent a lot of time, going down to the real basic level of building an organisational test strategy, slowly recruiting people in and bringing them on site and building a capability and starting to get a presence and showcasing what we were doing and the benefit they were going to achieve out of it. And slowly chip it away. And the most important aspect of it is continually to showcase the benefit you're providing. Mm-hmm. Initially, the benefit, it could be quality being delivered. It could simply be showing them what testing is actually doing because they haven't had that visibility before. Once you start getting a bit of that quality finding, you then start seeing that you could start saving them some money, because you'll find that there is a lot of people around who actually aren't adding value to the organisation. So you can remove a couple of people and replace them with more skilled resources. So you start getting dollar savings. And that's another little win. And then you start getting a bit more speed to market delivery. And then you move to the sexy stuff, right? Then you start thinking about automation and you start thinking about, how can we do things smarter and with a more quality focused risk management approach mm-hmm. to our delivery. And as soon as they start seeing some of these benefits, they really get on board and they really push your agenda through the organisation.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear. Anything to add, Sandra?
Yeah, same thing, showing those success along the way. And we did a lot of metrics and KPIs and road shows to kind of partner with the teams and identify those wins and those successes and really, bring that to light so that it become more of what the teams wanted to do. They wanted to be successful as well in their agile transformation, and that became part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add one of the really interesting parts for us as part of our transformation is one of the things we first did was move from a large centralized testing center of excellence to a smaller global quality engineering team, and we federated testers back out into the development agile teams. But as part of determining that was the right step for us to take, we started by just listening. What were the challenges you had with a central testing organization? Mm-hmm. Can we fix those by decentralizing, federating back out? If that can fix it, are there other things we need to focus on as well to ensure that we're keeping, quality standards, et cetera, consistent throughout the federated teams and they aren't just running off cowboy?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to touch on the metrics aspect of it. How you explain the metrics that you need to provide to your stakeholders is very key. When I joined ANZ, the vendor who was currently in place, was all excited about how good they were. We've got 100,000 automated test cases. And you're like, yeah, okay. And how often do you run them? Oh, we don't run them. We just build them. But we get money for automating a test case. So unless you can show the value, and the value is the key bit, you could go to a C-level executive and go, I've got 100,000 automated test cases and I run them every night. And his response will be, or her response will be, so what? Mm-hmm. What does that mean to me? Have you mitigated risk? Have you got enough coverage for my systems that I've got confidence of deploying into production? Yeah. So when you're going through the journey, it can't simply be, I've saved you $1 million, I've automated 100,000 test cases. When you explain the metrics that you are delivering, it has to be towards a value that the organisation sees helps drive them to in the direction they want to go. So you just got to be very mindful as you go through the journey that it's not simply, I saved you $1 million, I've reduced headcount by 10, mm-hmm. I can deliver quicker now than I did before, because you can deliver as fast as you want, but if you're delivering crap in a production, you're not delivering anything. If you reduce your cost, but then you can't hit any delivery timelines, then what value have you added to the organisation? So you've got to be very mindful in how you present the outcomes of your journey to the different levels of the organisation. Because the way you would speak to your team about the journey would be different to you'd speak to some of your customer stakeholders, which would be different to the C-level executives. So you need to be very clear in how you manage the message up and down the organisation.
Yeah, makes sense. And I mean, you also touched a little bit that you talked about the journey, all of you, and you touched a little bit about some challenges you had and lessons learned. Can we talk about that as well a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things is just, the constant change. So as soon as you think you've got it right and you know what you're doing, something else is going to change on you. And so I think one of our biggest lessons learned was really being able to adapt to that change, and adjust things like the metrics. I know early on, one of our metrics was number of test cases, and we had to kind of, backpedal a little bit and say that's not a valuable metric, right? Yeah. Because again, if you're not running them, if you're not using them, is that the right thing to be reporting? So, a lot of rework along the way to find out what is the right thing to measure, what's beneficial to, the organization to show. And then just, the keeping up with the change of just, the processes and different tools being introduced. And it's just, constantly something new. And that's, you have to be able to kind of adjust to that quickly and partner with the teams to do so.
Yeah.
And I think one of the first challenges we ran across would just have been just in the sheer volume of the change that we were introducing to the organization, and in ensuring that transition happened in a smooth, as smooth as can be fashion. And that it took time, and we needed to allow that time for it to go well. And then mapping out what we wanted that new journey and that roadmap to be with our new suppliers. And ensuring we had the right tools in place to be able to support us on that journey. It definitely took time to go through pilots, POCs, and determine what the right methods were for us to go down this process.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, challenges are part of any kind of change program. Call it a transformation, call it change. You're always going to have a challenge. The challenge is going to be anywhere from buying from your team, buying from stakeholders, buying from external programs, and continually being able to sell that message. The other thing is there will be change impact. So don't be afraid. You're going to lose some really good people along the journey, but you're also going to get some really good people on the journey. So don't be afraid to make the hard decision. If you don't make any type of change to what you're trying to do, you will never transform, because you've got to actually change something. And that will be people, process, tooling, communication strategies, going and getting yourself funding, right? A lot of testing programs don't actually have any funding. They are funded by somebody else. So you end up being the tail. When you're driving this, you're actually driving and being the innovator in this activity. So you have to have hard conversations about, I need money, and this is the value you'll get for the money you give me, and be able to continue to depict that. So it is challenging. You will get resistance along the way. But the biggest thing to bear in mind is the journey never finishes. If you think the journey is going to finish somewhere along the path, you're kidding yourself. You would need to continue to transform. So what you should do is just think of the transformation activity as just part of your everyday job. Yep. Every day you should be looking at what can we do to continue to improve, to continue to keep pace with the engineering departments. How do we keep pace with the industry? And if you have that as part of your mantra, what you find is it's not a transformation program, it's not a change program, it's part of your everyday job. Yep. And as the leader, my job isn't necessarily the day-to-day operational activities. My job is to be 12 to 18 months ahead of my team and be able to give them the path of where we need to get to.
Yeah, you spoke about the, the transformation journey never ends, right? And same thing. So we've talked about 4 years and plus and how long we've been doing that. And we also continue to transform. So we started with people, process, tools, Do you even have QA resources? Do you have a process in place? The basics. And then once we got to a certain point of that, then it was building on the maturity model and looking at the maturity model that we worked with Tricentis a lot on, looking at how are the teams maturing in what they're doing today. So it started out with just your people, process, tools. Now we're looking at the maturity model and the maturity of the teams, what's next, and there's always the what's next, what's new, and what's the new challenge as we accelerate and move more towards our continuous testing.
Mm-hmm. And I think somebody of you yesterday mentioned to me, quality is everybody's responsibility, which I really, really liked. Can we talk a little bit about that? Probably also when you say everybody's, is it development and test together? How is the setup? Can you guys explain that a little bit to me?
I like to think of it as, with so many of our teams being agile, right? And it's an agile team, and that's how they should be thinking about it. Yes, everybody has a role within that team in that particular Scrum or Kanban or whatever method you're using. But the entire team owns the quality of what's released, from the product owner to the developers to the Scrum Master to those who are playing a testing role. It's not in times past, it's been, whether it's waterfall or even sometimes in Agile, it's throw the code over the wall. Testers are responsible for the quality in the end. If it doesn't work and something fails in production, it's the tester's fault, they didn't catch it. But that's not it. The entire team owns the quality of what you release. And once you get that mindset in people, it changes what they deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So within ANZ, we're now cross-discipline teams, and the expectation is that every member of that team has an equal voice. So if you're doing the testing service activities of that squad, there's no reason why you can't challenge the PO, the designers, the developers, in regards to what they're thinking about, how they're going to build the solution. And from our perspective, the feature that you deliver, you own in production. Mm-hmm. So if you want to deliver shit, well, guess what? You're cleaning it up in production, as opposed to being the old days where you hand it over to somebody else to look after. The other thing we're also trying to do is break down the role types. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to have everybody as an engineer. So the theory is, and we're not there yet, that in Sprint 1, we've got the designer, the developer, the tester. In Sprint 2, the designer, the developer, the tester. And what that brings to the fore is everyone understanding every part of the delivery cycle, and therefore, you start caring about the quality being delivered, as opposed to just being, well, I wrote the code, I don't care anymore, I've handed it over now. The thing with, and I'm sure it's across every organisation, but in ANZ, the drive is not necessarily the feature you've delivered, but it's the sustainability of production and looking after production and making sure the change you're delivering doesn't impact any other area of the bank. So the mantra is, if you're not sure, you're not putting it in.
Yeah.
All right. So we need to be very crisp on what does the risk of deploying the solution look like, and is the business stakeholder prepared to accept that risk? And the business stakeholder could be the business owner, or it could be a technology owner, but they need to understand the risk profile, and then they will make the call. So will they deploy with a defect? Potentially, if they're prepared to accept that risk. Mm-hmm. But that's a decision that needs to be made by whoever owns that feature or that function from a customer perspective.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit too about, testing being, the team's responsibility, and just really getting that mindset, shift for the team, and understanding what that means as far as, test-driven development and, shift left testing, and, it shouldn't be finger pointing and, well, development's not done, well, testing's, not ready, well, this or that, it should be a team activity to kind of transform, be successful, deliver quality, call out the risks, determine what those risks are, and let those product owners and business folks make the decisions that they want to make. So I think that's just, across the board, I'm constantly saying quality is, the responsibility of the entire organization.
I love that,
yeah, the entire organization, right? And it's got to be everybody's involved with that.
Yeah, and that's a mindset change, right, which takes some time. Very interesting. I think what would be also very interesting to talk a little bit about, DevOps and the tools and the tool chains. Everybody is like building that tool chain right now, is shifting left, and they want to test basically multiple times a day. Can you talk a little bit about where you are on that journey and what that means for you? Continuous delivery basically is the mantra around it, I would say.
That's one of my biggest headaches at the moment. And the reason being is I was 3 and a bit years through a change program for testing, where the bank decided we'll move from waterfall to agile, with the delivery cadence of 2-week sprints for the squads. We've got 52 squads in our division, and we look after payments, which is pretty much the heart of the bank. So, every transaction that comes in has to come through our system. So we needed to find a mechanism of continual testing. How do we always test to make sure we're ahead of the game? And the challenge we've had was, development teams and external parties would always say, we're ready to go, but testing's holding me up because you're spending 4 weeks doing a system integration test, and then you've got 3 weeks for a user acceptance test. Oh, we forgot the non-functional testing, and then we've got to do BVT. So we've actually built the code in 2 weeks, but it's taken us 6 months to deploy. So we needed to find a mechanism that enabled us to continually test. And we drove that by shifting left quite dramatically. So we've got automation engineers in squad now, and they start building their automated test cases as they decompose the feature or function. And initially they sat back and said, "Oh, but we can't write a test case because we haven't got the design and we haven't got the code." And so the mindset change happened from there. So we started explaining to them, you've got to write some pseudocode. Think as a developer, start writing what you think the test case will look like. And that's where you start your testing. Because at that point, you'll start seeing whether what you're writing from a pseudocode perspective and what the developer's starting to build, whether that's matching or not. So there's your first validation. As the code is slowly being developed, the second issue we had was developers don't want to hand over code until they're 100% comfortable that it works. So you need to break that mindset that says, when you have a portion of your solution ready, let's test it with a portion of my test case, knowing that the whole solution won't work. And slowly building that relationship and having that test go. At that point, we have a bit of a DevOps cycle where as soon as the developer's ready to deploy, they press the deployment, it gets automatically picked up, deployed in a secondary environment. Automatically, a number of test cases are picked up and executed based on what they've deployed to validate the quality of the solution. If those test cases don't pass, the code gets rejected and pushed back. If it passes, it then gets moved into the next environment where a bigger suite of test cases are executed, plus a level of regression and a level of integration. So our expectation is before a squad finishes their 2-week sprint, they will have to have completed unit, system, a level of integration, a level of performance to be anywhere near a definition of done to enable us to drop it into our continuous implementation validation, where we test it against the rest of the bank for a week, and then we make a call on whether we deploy or not. Where we want to do is move further right and have more testing and analysis happening in production that we then retrofit back. So the theory is you're continually evaluating everything that's happening and retrofitting and tweaking and testing and always keeping your eye on the ball.
Yeah, very much.
And it is a tough journey.
Yeah, absolutely. What Alex just described is definitely what we're attempting to start. We are on a roadmap to move our automation to a point to where we can move from just having automated test cases to actually building ones that run unintended to be able to move to a continuous testing journey. We have teams working absolutely right now on developing that DevOps pipeline, getting all the tooling in place, slowly and steadily getting teams built onto that tooling. And our GQE organization is right there with them, helping to enable, at least for those teams that are slowly moving, that continuous testing platform.
Sorry. I'm taking over now. just be mindful, and this is key. Because we're evolving testing and it's becoming an engineering function, you do need to have a look at your resources doing the work. Because a manual tester may struggle with the thought around pseudocode, being able to speak up in stand-up meetings and voicing their opinion. So you have to be very mindful of your people, and you will turn over a fair amount of people to get the right team and right resources in to help you achieve your outcomes.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that I had talked to another company about was the fact that when they went through the transformation, they kind of went through the process of re-interviewing their resources, right? Because it's a whole mindset change. And so if the resources don't have the right mindset, then maybe it is time to move on from those because it is different, right? So the other thing with the DevOps and the continuous testing that we were talking about is we have 20 plus platforms with automated test cases. We have nearly 25,000 automated test cases with Tosca right now. So it's definitely a challenge to get continuous testing going with that complexity, different release cycles, different build cycles. So we built smoke suites for our applications as a starting point, and those are executed daily through the distributed execution. And so we've at least got the ability to run those, and we're working on the scaling that out to be able to run our regression more. We run it once a sprint today for almost 25,000 scenarios are ran at least once a sprint. But we are working towards a virtual environment where we can execute that nightly. Nice. So that's our goal still.
Very, very interesting. Okay, we have a couple of minutes left. Very great discussion. Can we talk a little bit about outcomes? So I think the audience would probably be also very interested. Where are you right now? I mean, we said the journey is going on, right? But where do you stand right now?
Yeah, so where we stand right now is just with that, like how do we really move more towards the continuous testing and being able to execute, everything more often? How do we bring that into the build pipelines and be more successful to partner with the delivery that way? So the outcomes have been, we're a quality organization that people want to be a part of, and now we're known, within the organization, and teams are coming to us and asking for our help, to automate and do more. So that to me is success. When they're coming to you and asking, the quality teams to get engaged. That's to great. Me, that's a great outcome.
Yeah, awesome.
I would say we're still very much at the beginning of our journey. We mentioned that it doesn't end. The journey kind of changes and morphs as we go along. But we are right now in the process. We finished, transitioning to different suppliers. Like I said, building our roadmaps and working with teams to get those test cases automated so they can get them into that pipeline.
This is a very interesting question. And the reason why it's an interesting question is because my philosophy is the journey never finishes. So where am I on my journey? Last December, I would have thought I'd be about 70% of the way through the journey before the next leg kicks in. And then when the bank decided to transform the whole enterprise, I was at 10% of my journey. But I think what you find is don't worry about how far through the journey you are. As leaders, we need to stay ahead of the game. So I don't worry about how much have I accomplished. I'm more worried about am I providing value to the organisation with the engineering principles I'm bringing in from a testing perspective? Yep. Am I keeping in line and ahead of the engineering teams? So, all right, you're kicking me off.
I wanted to say that was a great ending. Thanks so much all for joining. If you have questions, please, they are here all day today and tomorrow, and are happy to share with you. I think really great stuff, and thanks so much again for joining this panel. Thank you, everybody.